Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Summit. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console next to the chat feature. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce our moderator, Ann Anthony, Chief Financial Officer and Board Observer at Oberon Fuels. We are excited to have Ann and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Winning the War for Finance Talent, Strategies to Find, Hire, and Retain Top Performers. Welcome, Ann, and over to you.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Brittany noted, I'm Ann Anthony. I'm the CFO of Oberon Fuels and a board observer. Oberon is focused on producing clean biofuels, basically portable decarbonized molecules from organic waste. We co-locate on farms, and it is the very essence of a circular economy. I've spent a number of years in the energy space. I've raised over $9 billion in my career, debt, equity, and every flavor in between. And so I'm very excited to be with you today. I will kick it over to Stacy to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Ann. Good morning. My name is Stacy Snyder. I am the Senior Vice President of Finance and Accounting Executive Search at Addison Group. We are headquartered out of Chicago and are a boutique staffing firm. My focus for the last 15 years has been in the accounting and finance space, being an accountant by trade myself. Prior to Addison Group, I spent 6.5 years at Robert Half. And I now sit in Austin, Texas, but oversee our Austin, San Antonio, Minneapolis, Phoenix, and Atlanta branches for our executive search group. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Bjorn, how about you?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Bjorn Alstrad. I've been doing the AI thing for a while, since the 90s, with machine translation, then later in the early 2000s, speech recognition, contact center transformation using AI. Then I was privileged to be part of the early IBM Watson team, 2015 through 19, and later at Wells Fargo and Truist implementing AI, having hired AI teams, managed them, trying to retain them, and now have become independent. I'm an independent AI strategy advisor, and also have developed software that helps with talent pipeline clarity. So I think I've done a lot of different things that are related to our topic, and I look forward to our discussion.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. So I think we're in a very interesting time, right? We came out of COVID with a very, robust job market. People were, literally, you didn't even have to do anything, right? And you were, either getting a job offer or someone on your team was saying, I'm going, here. Things have slowed down a little bit, but there are also a number of things kind of against that backdrop, which I think have also influenced, how folks are starting to think about talent. Obviously, AI is one of those things. There are some others as well. But Stacy, I'd like to kick it over to you to get started. I guess, obviously, given where you sit, right, in the staffing world, I'm curious about how you've seen the hiring landscape for finance talent evolving over the past couple of years. And I'd be curious as well if you could maybe share a couple of examples with us.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. So in the recruiting space, you always hear, hey, is it a candidate market or is it a client market, right? So are candidates driving the market, or are the clients and the hiring managers driving the market? And what I think that you mentioned kind of post-COVID, just everybody making a move, people taking new opportunities, all of those things. And not all of those were as calculated as maybe hiring managers had done before, right? Like I have to get someone in the seat. I need this person. And sometimes fast tracking either a decision or the hiring of someone just to get that role filled, right? Because we need the head count, we need to get it filled. And so what has transpired over the last couple of years is I would really say that we now are kind of deadlocked. It's not a candidate driven market and it's not a client hiring manager driven market. It's a both, right? They both have set expectations a lot higher than they were 4 years ago. Interview processes are longer now. One key thing that we have seen being added post-COVID is either some sort of assessment and or case study that's being done, right? So I'm going to give you this data. I want you to present it back to me. And really at every level. Typically, we only saw that at the CFO and or C-suite. We're seeing that for a 5-year analyst, right? Or for a senior accountant. I'm going to give you this data. I want you to put it in a certain format and send it back to me. Or I would like you to make an assumption based on this data and then provide me with kind of why and what you would do with it. And so, I think the real world examples is that we are now seeing that at almost every single level. Some sort of case study, some sort of Excel assessment, just depending on the role. But a hiring process to date is very rarely without some sort of assessment on, I think, a couple things. One is the management of data, right? I'm going to give you a lot of data. How are you going to wrangle that data? And then how are you going to put it into something that I can utilize to make better business decisions? But I also think that it gives, it's giving the talent pool an opportunity to put their communication skills out there as well. Accountants by trade aren't necessarily the best sellers and or public speakers, right? And so as we're moving to a space where we're wearing multiple hats, an accountant might also be wrangling data and be mining data that needs to then be able to present that information to leadership. Those soft skills are even more of a focus for the hiring teams now than they ever were before.
Bjorn, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, very much in alignment with the soft skills and around communication. Something that I've emphasized with my team as well at previous roles at Wells Fargo and Truist is this kind of cross training, so that if you're a data scientist and you're very fluent in all the algorithms and the advanced learning techniques and AI techniques, how critically important it is to, in your head, pre-translate what it is that you do and show the courtesy to people who are not technical or not technical in your way, and then have a portable value proposition of a project, of your own activity, of your skills that can resonate with folks that are not, experts in, let's say, large language models. And I encourage, for example, my team to read a book called Save the Cat. And that's a book on screenwriting. And the reason why that is pertinent is it helps you make good hooks. It helps you make good, punchy value proposition summaries, helps you structure a story arc around even project-based work. So it's something that is very, very technical. Helps you. This book helps you translate that into a catchy value prop, a good summary, almost like a pitch in Hollywood, great pitch. And I found that my team found cross training very, very useful because it's muscles that you do not normally exercise. And then similarly, I would then also encourage non-technical people to at least develop, I call it like, if you go to Italy and you learn a few phrases, survival Italian, it will make your trip so much more enjoyable. And I encourage them to learn a few phrases of survival Python or survival, any technical, coding language or hands-on technical expertise, to show in turn the courtesy that you are trying to understand what folks are doing all day in the data science world or in the coding or IT world, and then bring that new understanding, almost like a cultural understanding, to the table. Both of those facilitate conversation and make it so much easier to create alignment around a technical vision, an AI project vision, and also excitement because you're learning new things, and that aids retention. So those are some of the thoughts to Stacey's point, how critically important communication is and how often you have to practice it. Like any foreign language, you should practice it regularly. And so we had, during team calls, we would have shout outs and say, hey, what are you working on? But it couldn't be, I've been tuning the hyperparameters of my gradient boosting model, because that's not portable language, right? But it would have to be expressed in a way that would make sense, let's say, to the C-suite.
No, I think that's a great point, and thank you for that recommendation. Saving the cat, is that what it was?
Save the cat. Yeah, it's a great book on screenwriting. And I have to give you a disclaimer, a warning. If you read this book, you will never be able to watch another movie without being able to predict exactly what happens next. So, fair warning.
All right, save the cat. I think you also raise a good point, right? That maybe it could be summed up as know your audience, right? Be cognizant of kind of who it is you're trying to communicate to, and making sure that you're able to express the concepts that need to be expressed, meet them where they are, right? To your point, if you're speaking to the C-suite, you got to bring it way up high and keep it short and pithy. If you're talking with someone, who is doing the same thing that you are doing, right? Obviously, you can get in the weeds and use all the jargon you want, but it's a good point. I personally have used I just call it the technical assessment, right? Especially when you're trying to hire maybe someone into that analyst or associate role, right? Who's supporting either on the FP&A side or an M&A, because it can be very difficult to really, suss out how qualified someone is in terms of model building and sophistication, et cetera. So, here's the real world example. Turn it into, whether it's a case study or whether it's a, evaluation model or whatever, should we buy it or not, kind of assessment. I've found that to be, pretty helpful. And again, can really get at how well can someone communicate, right? Because at the end of the day, you've got to translate those numbers into, does it make sense or not to move forward? So thank you for that.
Yeah, and maybe a last point on this is, or at least from my end, I'd like to think in terms of courtesy, cognitive courtesy, so that you translate your message, your value proposition, your project summary into a language that will be maximally effective given the context and audience. And that's different from efficient. And so when doctors talk to each other in the operating theater, they of course are very efficient and effective, but the same shorthand would fail with the patient's family. And so thinking about what is the jargon that you have become used to, your acronyms, your verbal uniform, so to speak, and how can I be more courteous to my audience? Because contextually, effectiveness is very, very different, and but it will do wonders for your career and your opportunity, because you will be one of the few people that have actually put thought into pre-translating your message.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Bjorn, I'd like to stay with you. Let's talk a little bit about AI and how finance leaders can think about leveraging AI and data-driven insights to really, maybe accelerate or modernize the hiring process and ultimately identify better qualified or quality candidates.
Sure, and I would like to, in the context of HR, or talent strategy, or any of the related fields, and frankly, in almost all use cases of AI, thinking of AI as augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, not about replacing people, but augmenting them, doing things that the machine simply does faster and better and more consistently than you would be able to do yourself, because there's just too much data. There's too much variety, volume, and velocity of data. And we see this today in hiring. So on average, a job listing will generate between 160 and 250 resumes very, very quickly, often within a few hours. Some of the more desirable roles, thousands of people will apply. Of course, are using AI. So we see an increase in unbelievably customized cover letters, highly tailored resumes, because applicants themselves are using the technology. There's any number of applications out there, software as a service, web applications that claim to have completely automated the kind of blast of resumes to open positions. And then conversely, of course, there are applicant tracking systems and AIs then trying to filter back out a lot of the slop, that's coming across the wire. And AI slop is becoming prevalent on not only in hiring, but also on LinkedIn and many other places where you very clearly can tell immediately that this is generated by AI. So in my personal context of the application that I've written and with my co-founder, we try to really tune the use of AI and keeping it to what it does really well. And in this case, turning resumes compared to, let's say, a job specification or a sample resume or other position descriptions into numbers that the AI will help you basically turn recruiting into Moneyball, but importantly, also giving you an English narrative so that you can say, you can back check the machine and go like, well, I gave this score of 85 points for machine learning ops, in this case, for this resume, for this job spec, and here's why, right? And then also for the job seeker, giving feedback. If you'd like a higher score in this context, here are the things you could do to add to your resume. So the importance of working with the machine to, get very, very good crystal clarity on the numeric composition of the talent pool, but in a very fair and unbiased way. And that's the other critical thing is I think that there's legitimate concern that AI is introducing biases, amplifying them. The models are opaque. It's very hard to tell, if the model preferred, if it's not fully explained and fully transparent, why did it give me 80 or 90 or 10 or 0, right? Or why did it pick this resume to go on top of the heap and this one further down? And so being very, very clear of the expectation that it must be auditable, unbiased, fair. How do you know that, right? And then why did you award this score? What can I do about it? What give agency back to the applicants and the hiring manager, and really make that a collaboration. And I think that's getting a little bit lost in some of the bigger platforms where it's just telling you like call Frank or Rayshawn or Roberto first, and this AI war of I'll produce more AI output and on the other end the machine has to filter it back down because it's getting too much is also not helpful to anybody, right? Because we're seeing just more velocity and volume of data without necessarily veracity and without quality. So I think that it remains to be determined. I mean, applicant tracking systems, of course, have been around forever. Previously, more based around keyword spotting and more simplistic regular expressions. Large language models have clearly accelerated this. And as a user and creator of these tools, I just always want to know more. I want to know how the machine is quote unquote thinking, how it's giving me results, why, what agency do I retain? Because at the end of the day, in any HR talent space, AI is absolutely not a substitute. Absolutely not. You should never outsource the human touch, your empathy, your deep understanding of the hiring role, what will make somebody successful, well beyond what can be written down, right? And that's where, of course, all of these scanning tools fall short, because if it's not in your resume or in the job spec, the machine cannot act on it because it doesn't know, right? So that's why I think this collaboration of, yes, there's some value to the more rote tasks, and machines can do that quite well, but the human role continues to be extremely important, because AI cannot really read a room. AI cannot really have empathy and understand what beyond the stated needs are really important to the hiring manager. What are the unstated needs, sometimes unconscious unstated needs, right? And that's where expertise and skill of the operator, of the talent professional, remains so critically important. Of course, given the volume, if you have 2,000 resumes on a Friday afternoon, well, what are you going to do? You can't read them all, right? With the average 160 resumes on the low end, if you just spend 10 minutes, you're looking at 33 hours, and it's just all going to run together in your head, right? So yes, those tools have a place as part of a bigger value chain where the human continues to be extremely important.
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day where a client was telling me that they were using AI to screen out candidates for a position that they had, and ultimately it ended up screening out every single candidate. And what they learned is that the candidates were using AI to apply to the job. And so they were both expecting the AI to do all of the work, not just to be an add-on, right? Like a supporting kind of player in the role. They expected them to take the full load of what they were wanting to do, and that's not what it's intended for, right? It's intended to be an add-on, to be in addition to. And I think that from a hiring perspective, you're never going to be able to eliminate that human aspect, because the AI bot does not manage your people. The AI bot doesn't close your books, right? It can only do what it can do. But I do think that there is definitely an opportunity for it to be the supporting actor. I think we just need to understand that it's never going to be the main character, and we need to treat it as such.
Mm-hmm. Stacey, I'm curious if you are seeing a difference in terms of how firms are using AI, or even within your own business, right? Is there a difference in how AI is applied based on the level that you're trying to fill, right? Is there, because like at the more senior levels, technical ability, right, is absolutely key, but sometimes it really is more about softer skills that I don't know how AI can successfully assess that, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you are really looking for, deep technical transactional experience, maybe that's
Right.
a little bit, right? So I'm curious, what are you seeing?
So I was talking to the head of an internal audit company last week, and she was telling me that she had actually had a couple of interviews, or no, their HR had a couple of interviews, and throughout that process, they realized that they were bots, that it wasn't a real person on the other end of the interview. Honestly, I had heard of that happening in IT quite a bit, but this is kind of the first that I'm hearing of it in accounting. But she's like, I have not seen anybody that has been a real human, right? We keep seeing these. Well, I think a couple of things here. One is that unfortunately, AI is being used to inflate what someone can do, right? And so one, it's overselling the product, not saying you can't do XYZ, but can you do all of that plus some, right? And so unfortunately, it's creating the ability to oversell what you can actually do. And then it's also creating an issue to where, we're getting into that interview process, and the hiring manager's like, well, okay, what we're talking about doesn't match this, right? And so I think that a couple of things. I think one, hiring managers can use AI to ask very solid questions that are driven on someone's background, right? So this resume says this. What type of technical questions should I be asking them to make sure that they have that skill set, right? And so it kind of does a little bit of both. One, it's gonna test their ability to answer on the spot, but it's also gonna test, do they really have that skill set, or do they not? And so I think we're just gonna have to be, again, when I was saying earlier, extra steps are being added. We are seeing that. We're seeing those extra steps added to make sure that what is in front of us is really what's being advertised.
Yeah, and the AI augmented applicant, right, where you can tell that they have ChatGPT running on the side, or they have a specialist tool running on the side to answer questions, is a reality today. I've seen on both ends, frankly, on the hiring side too, where a pre-screening interview is sometimes now done by an AI avatar from the hiring company, right? And equally, I think a rather strange experience, I'd say, for the applicant. But the idea that you can completely outsource, if you can completely outsource your skill and knowledge as an applicant, then the company should not hire you. They should hire a bot.
Yeah.
And so the deception cannot last, because as soon as you're then asked to perform or present in a meeting, obviously it will be very clear that you didn't have those skills. So it's a challenging. I think it's a very challenging environment, and it also comes back to sometimes people that are very highly qualified but don't have the skill of the resume writer, or even with the AI leaving things out, right? So because if you give AI a resume to finesse, it can only write it can go off what you wrote. If you have a big plot hole in there and there's a core skill that you left out entirely, it can't make it better, right?
It doesn't know, right? Yeah.
And so these AI tools can be helpful yet again, because if you say, like, compare this job posting to my resume, and you get a really low score on a particular chunk of expertise that you have, it's just like a gentle resume coaching reminder, now automated or semi-automated, to say, hey, you left something out, right? You're not putting yourself forward in your best light.
Okay, that's great. So I guess let's shift gear a little bit, and let's talk about some, effective strategies, or however you want to call it, for actually hiring and retaining top finance talent today. Stacey, I'm curious, obviously beyond compensation, right? Because everybody wants to, that we always want to make more money, but what other things are you seeing companies successfully use to attract and retain their finance talent?
So this has changed so much over the last, honestly, like 10 years. 10 years ago, one of the primary things that, two primary driving factors were money and benefits, right? And I'm talking about the core medical benefits, not necessarily all of the extras and everything like that. And today, the number one driver that I see as either motivation and or what draws someone to an opportunity is who they're going to be reporting to. What is that person's, is that person want to be a mentor? Do they want to coach? Do they want to guide? Do they want to help this person further along in their career? Or are they just there to say, I need you to do this and that's it, right? And so that hands-on mentorship and leadership, I'm sure it has something to do with COVID and kind of that disconnect, right? We missed that interaction. We missed those one-on-ones, right? Nothing can replace face-to-face interaction. Some of them went virtually, some of them went just over the phone, right? And you're missing that guidance and that career coaching. And that is one of the things that I see as the most important thing is, one, what am I going to be doing? And then two is, who am I going to be doing it for? And do we have the same kind of goal and vision for my career? And will they help me get to where I want to go?
Yeah, very well said. I think that coaching, mentoring, especially in person, because you're missing so much, right? In a Zoom call, you're getting, some fraction of the actual body language. You're getting some fraction of the sense of how people are feeling in the room. And I found, in my experience, the biggest craving that's out there that creates real engagement and job satisfaction is the coaching and mentoring that's very bespoke, right? And that specifically addresses areas of what psychologists call unconscious things I didn't know. Because it's knowledge is very fungible now, and information has been you could use Google before. Now with the large language models, you can have conversations about things that go very deep very quickly. This watch for hallucinations, but with the modern search engines combined with LLMs, knowledge is very, very easily accessible, but it's very hard to look for things you didn't know. And so senior mentorship and engagement and cross-training in an unexpected way to the employee or the team member, him or herself, is what can really create very strong bonds that go well beyond compensation, right? That I can't find this mentoring relationship somewhere else, even for 20% more.
Right.
So that I think who you report to, who you report with, who you work with, and how the leader encourages this kind of cross-fertilization is a huge predictor of churn prevention and engagement and productivity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my previous roles, for example, we had a routine that we called kudos and campfires. And it was a part of our regular meeting. And kudos is obviously things that have gone well. And campfire was the virtual campfire. And something has not gone well. And we throw it into the campfire and read smoke signals so we can all learn from that. But importantly, campfire items had to be self-reported so that people, we created a ritual around bringing things up that didn't go well, a project that had failed, a meeting that didn't go well, a interaction at a conference that didn't go well, etc. And because of the self-reported nature and the kind of making it safe and face-saving to do this, we really encouraged people to learn from each other in that way. And that was also, the campfire items. At first, I had to deliver all of them for the first few weeks. I had to bring my own campfire items because people didn't believe it, right? That this was going to be okay. And so I would volunteer mine. And then very quickly people caught on and it is incredibly productive because you get so much leverage out of learning from these things that didn't pan out. And I'm happy to pay tuition, but not twice. Right. And so that was a good way to encourage people to learn from each other, mentor and coach each other. To Stacey's point, that is such a predictor of engagement and job satisfaction, in addition to the typical table stakes.
I'm going to steal that. But I totally agree. I think what type of learning environment are you providing, right? I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that we are human. And at the end of the day, we are all going to make mistakes. And it's about, one, I think taking ownership of them, and two, learning. So I tell everybody on my team that it's not a failure unless you've done it more than once. If you made a mistake, that's a learning opportunity. That's an opportunity for you to take a look. Is there anything we could have done differently and we would have had a different outcome? And if so, then you learn from it. That is a learning opportunity. And that is one of the great things that we get handed as a human, right? Now, with that being said, if we're looking at the fourth time that we did that, then yes, I would consider that a failure, right? But I always coach to that, is that one time a mistake, that's just a learning opportunity, and here's how we're going to move forward. And I think that a lot of people really appreciate the ability to not only make a mistake, but also be guided to, okay, how can I be better? How can I keep this from happening again and learn and grow from it? Not just as a professional, but as a human being.
Right. Yeah, no, I think those are great points. And I think, Bjorn, your willingness, right, to step up and lead and kind of, by example, right? Hey, I make mistakes too. I think is really key, because a lot of leaders, let's face it, talk about, oh, it's okay to make a mistake and, let's learn from it. But unfortunately, we've all heard the stories where that's not exactly the safe space outcome that people were expecting. Right. People are penalized, whatever. So I fall into that leadership bucket. Right. I agree. Let's learn by, the mistakes that we've all collectively made, and let's figure out how we don't do it again. And, kind of move forward versus finger pointing. But, leadership, I think, is really key here. The willingness of the leader to kind of show that humbleness. Right. And again, admit, when they've made mistakes and failed.
Yeah, and it's humanness, right?
Yeah.
And culture. People talk about culture and vision and strategy and things like that, and that's obviously, as we all know, much more than just printing it out and putting it on the wall. And culture is the things you encourage, net of the things you tolerate. And if you lead by example and say, yeah, I don't know that. Does anybody in the team know that? Or I don't know that. I'm going to look it up right now, right?
Yeah.
Those are things that I think that encourage then the snackable learning, the ad hoc learning, and not covering over things to face save and which are ultimately very, very detrimental to productivity and output.
Yeah.
Building a strong culture builds a strong community, and
Mhm.
you can do a lot with a very strong community. And community can be external, but it can most definitely be professional and internal. And uh, you will see wonders when you see a group of people coming together as a community and all working towards one goal,
Mhm.
with the understanding that, again, still all human, and all have the goal to move forward and learn better, learn and be better the next day.
Mhm. Yeah, I would echo that. I always joke and call it, it's 1 + 1 + 1 = 5, right? Because when
Yeah.
you've got a high performing team, right, firing on all cylinders, again, you may not be the strongest technically, you may make mistakes, but that team will be able to carry forward and accomplish, what maybe a more technical team or, whatever can't. So, okay, Bjorn, I want to talk a little bit more about AI, right? There's been a lot of conversation out there around, what AI is capable of doing and how that will ultimately impact entry level positions. But let's face it, right? Entry level positions, that's typically how you start your talent pipeline, right? You're bringing people in right out of college, or maybe
Mhm.
right out of graduate school. Honestly, they may not have a ton of practical experience. They've got a lot of book learning. So if we're going to be looking at AI to maybe do some of that work, how do we make sure that the people that are in school can actually get real world experience, right? That is practical and applicable. How do we think about, the impact that AI is going to have on hiring
Mhm.
and the talent pipeline?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a hugely complicated and complex topic, and we're seeing the impact of this now. There
Mhm.
are unemployment rate among recent grads in STEM, even in computer science and so on, are higher than they have been really in recent memory.
Mhm.
So the core consideration there is that the pyramid is changing shape. And actually, I just looked it up. I published 6 years ago when I was still more involved with IBM Watson. The idea of and it used to be a pyramid where you would start your career with sometimes rote and repetitive tasks, but you would get those 10,000 hours of experience and sometimes very grinding experience. It's Friday at 9 p.m. and you have to go through 50 more contracts to find the termination clause. But then years later, you have now developed a gut instinct, a gut feel for what a contract looks like and feels like, and things like that. And we now see that machines are doing a lot of that entry level work. And so the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid is being eaten away into a diamond shape. So frankly, I don't think anybody knows what 10 years from now, a managing director in an investment bank, a senior partner in a legal firm, a member of a consulting organization, or any kind of leadership organization, what their gut feeling, skills, and so on will be, because they are now the generation that is using these tools to automate away a lot of the entry level tasks. And that is absolutely a challenge for rethinking everything from your business model. If you're no longer being paid P times Q, I've put 20 junior analysts on this and I charge for their time at X rate, and some senior partners I charge at Y rate. Those business models are going away now,
Mhm.
as we see in almost all white collar professional services style organizations. So back to the very challenging question of what do we do about that, right? I think that organizations that are in a position to have rich data to share should build talent pipelines safely in both traditional feeder organizations like universities, schools, and colleges, as well as non-traditional organizations like online educational institutions, 3, 4, 5 month programs that exist purely virtually, massive online learning institutions. And they need to have a data strategy that will enable them to equip the next generation of talent to access that data, practice with real life problems. And so a micro piece of the answer is, how do you engage the future talent on real problems safely using anonymized and synthetic data from your own organization, and providing the ongoing mentoring and coaching that these students crave, right? And so talent strategy is the factory model of you'll come fully finished, or at least finished for your level of skill and age, out of university, and then will be plugged into a organization. That's going away.
Mm-hmm.
And so that collaboration, that outreach, and also the encouragement of non-traditional channels is, I think, absolutely critical. So very specifically for finance and banking, if you look at online competitions for data science, for example, you can host a competition on a platform such as Kaggle
Mm-hmm.
by providing a prize money and synthetic or anonymized data that's safe for consumption. And suddenly unlock thousands and thousands of people that would never have heard of you or would never have been considered by your organization before, because you've now practically opened the channel safely in a compliant and governed way, and have reached a new talent pool and helped that talent pool as well with a very specific fungible data set that is super useful to them in the context of a real problem. So those are, I think, that style of thinking. This is obviously not a pat answer for everybody, but that style of thinking, I think, is going to be required to both address the fact that folks that are entering the workforce now are having serious competition from AI solutions,
Mm-hmm.
as well as making it very practical and pragmatic for them to exercise those muscles that are going to be super useful in the workforce earlier as part of their education, for which companies, employers, etc., can provide data, coaching, mentorship, and context
Mm-hmm.
to real life problems and projects. So that, I think, that's a small part of the answer. At the same time, the idea of a multi-year degree that doesn't change is probably going to go away.
Yeah.
And if you look at the velocity of innovation in the sub segment of large language models, how much has happened in the last 6 months in just foundation models is staggering. What their new capabilities are, it's overwhelming. And so another more constitutional way of learning is to think about, what can I snack on?
Mm-hmm.
How can I break large pieces of knowledge into snackable increments? How do I make it accessible to a broader audience, a broader talent pool, including
Mm-hmm.
inside and outside of your organization? And how do you then encourage and reward people that take a 5-minute break to learn something new on YouTube, or have a little project going that they're doing a little bit of coding in an available time on
Mm-hmm.
one weekday, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. How do I flow that back into my incentive scheme, my annual goals, KPIs, OKRs, and things like that? But having lived through the first .com, having lived through cognitive computing wave of 2015-ish, right, with Watson, and now with large language models, so over 30 years of experience and seeing these, big waves of disruption. In my mind, this is by far the fastest moving one, by far. And so the ability to keep up will rely on having an experimentation mindset, really thriving on ambiguity and learning, and making it possible for as broad of an audience as possible to snack on new things, and then be able to track and reward that as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, I think we probably only have time for maybe one other question. We did get some audience questions. So what recommendations can you make for organizations struggling to leverage AI or automation in the recruitment process? Stacey, you want to pick that one up?
Oof. This is a challenging one because I think we talked about this earlier, is that, this is a very personal two-way interaction. When you're applying to a job, that first interaction is very, very important. Sometimes that first interaction is almost more important than kind of the ultimate interview process. And I would say the exact same thing turned around, is that I think that first interaction from a client with an applicant is also very, very important. And so, I don't know that I have, and Vijor might have a better answer for this. I think that what you need to understand is utilize the tool for what it can do, not necessarily expect it to do the whole process or to replace a human, right? I think it can augment. I think it can make a process faster. I think it can ask certain questions. I think it can help you throughout the process. But again, we talked about this earlier, is that this is a very human interaction process, the getting a new job, the interviewing, the applying. And so I would just caution to, yes, use it to the best of its abilities, but make sure that you're not totally just replacing that human interaction.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Stacy, very much in alignment. When you look at these tools, there's hundreds of them, right? So there's it's baked into all the major ATS and the Workdays of the world and Greenhouses of the world, and LinkedIn, of course, and then there's many dozens of other smaller tools, including my own. When you look at these tools, think about explainability, interpretability, meaning how did it do that, and can I follow step by step, and governance. Can I in a regulator to an audit team what I used this tool for and how? And so those are really important aspects of being able to use these tools safely, right? It's not magic, it's math under the covers, secretly, still all of it, right? Very complex math, and that's why GPUs do so well at it. But the idea of interpretability, explainability, auditability, and governance, and being able to confidently use these tools is so important. And those are just best practices to ask probing questions. And then ideally, I did a lot of third-party due diligence and third-party risk assessments when I was at Truist and at Wells Fargo. When you have a vendor approach you, have at least one person on the call from your team that is an actual expert in how AI works, so that they can ask the second and third level uncomfortable questions, right? Because there's a lot of marketing flim-flam out there, of course, and hand waving.
Yeah.
And being able to ask the second, third question, how does it really do that? How do you know that? Can you explain that to me? Those are important purchasing and buying behaviors when it comes to any AI, right? That give you peace of mind. Because at some point, depending on your geography, the regulators will take a very close look at this, and already are. And the regulatory landscape is evolving very quickly as well. So keep in mind that even if there isn't a regulation today, you may be audited for your decision that you made with the tool 6 months from now. And it becomes discoverable and other things as case law is forming and as case law is evolving and emerging. So just make sure you're comfortable with how it actually did what it did and can explain it to somebody else.
No, that's a great point. Okay, so I think, I guess we probably should wrap up here maybe with some final thoughts. Stacy, do you want to start?
Yeah. I think that, the applying for a new job, taking a new job, that as just a whole is a very personal thing, and it can be very challenging. It's a very raw moment. Maybe someone needs to make a move, but they don't necessarily want to. And so, I would, again, just really hone in on if you are trying to leverage and put your company the best foot forward, I think that the interactions that you have with those applicants, the process that you put them through is going to be almost more important than what that ultimate offer looks like. Because I liken the interview process to the dating process, right? Like, this is the best you're gonna get. And it's one of the most important things that you will do as an organization, and that is to vet and date this person to see if they could ultimately be an employee. I would not overlook the small details or the small communication pieces or anything like that whenever you are creating a path for a potential employee.
Yes, that's the best day we're going to treat you.
Yeah.
Likewise for candidates, frankly, I think, listen to your gut and heart, and if something seems off and, doesn't, no matter how great the role description is, if it doesn't seem to click, it's very important to listen to the intangibles and see if that can work for you. And so in general, I've now I've worked for 5-person startups in Silicon Valley. I've worked for IBM. I've worked for Wells Fargo, and now my own business. At the end of the day, be authentic, you can only pretend so long. It's very expensive cognitively to keep putting on a face that's not you. Be authentic, both sides, both from the hiring team as well as the candidate. Use the AI tools appropriately. If there's something AI specific I can help with, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a chat. And all the best in this crazy, fast evolving AI time.
That's great. Thanks, Bjorn. Brittany, I think we've got 4 seconds left, so back to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for such an insightful panel discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A, but we will share with you guys any questions that did come through from the audience. And thank you guys all so much again. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 12:45, which will be a keynote titled AI and Automation in Finance, Unlocking Strategic Advantages for CFOs. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all again.